You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. I'm deeply inspired and motivated by folks who have faced death and have come through it not only more aware of the brilliance of life, but are able to articulate that message in a meaningful way with people they encounter. And we have a guest who has gone through this that we'd like to introduce you to today. You're going to love him. His name is Danny Bader. Danny Bader is a near-death survivor. He's a best-selling author who inspires others to live with greater joy and purpose. In 1992, a workplace accident sent 8,000 volts through his body. It left him clinically dead for 6 minutes. Danny survived, but his friend Bruce, working at the job site with him, did not. Grief and survivor's guilt followed before Danny began to see his second chance as a gift. Today, Danny joins us to share how he moved through that difficult time, from darkness to gratitude, the unexpected encounter that changed his path, and why he believes that our next breath may feel automatic, but it's not guaranteed. We discuss slowing down, we talk about being present, we talk about appreciating the ordinary moments that too often we overlook. My friends, if you are going through the motions in your work, your faith, your family, your life, this conversation's for you. You will leave inspired to live more fully, to love more intentionally, and to ask the question, what will I create with the time that I have left? So let me loop him in. My friend, now yours. His name, Danny Bader. Danny, welcome to Live Inspired Podcast with John O'Leary.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. I look forward to it.
For me, it's great to have a friend that I'm sitting across from right now, and it's great to have a story that I know will positively change lives of our listeners today. So here's my first question to you. I had an early morning flight today, and someone asked me on the journey, what do you do for a living? And then I had to figure out, man, how do I respond to this? So on our early morning flight together, if someone were to say to you, Danny, what do you do for a living? How do you respond?
I say, you know what? I really go out into the world and slow people down and make sure that they realize that this life is a gift. You can't take your breaths. You can't take your beats for granted. And you really want to make sure you live with a radical reverence for your life. And when I say that, they usually go, okay, tell me more about that. And then we kind of get into it. So I used to say I'm an author and a speaker, and then they either glaze over or they say, what do you write and what do you speak about? But it's really that. Slow people down. Just kind of let them observe where they are, how they're thinking, what they're doing, where they want to go, and see if I can plant some seeds of inspiration or direction for them.
Without going into detail, I want to come back to radical reverence. But when people hear that generally, what do they hear and what do you hope that they hear instead?
Yeah, I think what they hear is kind of like speaker mumbo jumbo sometimes, where we make these words up. And then as soon as I say it, though, because usually when I say it, I've already given them the framework of the 3 levels that we exist at, right? We can be at rock bottom, where you and I have both been, maybe the listeners there, there's a disconnect from the world, the beauty of life, the spirit. You're just stuck, man, and it's a dark place. And then in the middle is the functional fog, where you're just kind of going through the motions, and it's not necessarily bad. It's okay.
Right.
It's just okay enough that you're not going to take the next step to really get to living with a radical reverence for your life. So as soon as I say it, I say, hey, listen, radical means very different from the usual or traditional. So radical means you're just not going through the motions. And reverence has no religious connotation now. Reverence means a deep respect and awe and appreciation for life. So as soon as I kind of follow that up real quick, they go, okay, now I kind of see. It's really living where you're just like, you know what, man, life is unbelievable in the good times and in the struggles. So that's radical reverence.
Well, the cool thing is, as you and I journey today, we will be talking about some good times, and we absolutely will be talking about some difficult ones too. Most conversations I have with my friends on this podcast begin with childhood, and we spend time talking about teachers and parents and dogs and picket fences or struggles. And with you, Danny, I'm just going to jump into where you were in 1992. So, first of all, professionally, what were you doing back in 1992?
So I was a bartender at Hula Hands at King of Prussia, if anybody knows that place. And I was working as a roofer for a few days a week. I graduated college, had a sales job, selling medical equipment, and it didn't fulfill me. So I was in 92. I had been to Aspen, Colorado a couple of times out there tending bar and skiing, and I just had an attraction to the mountains. So I was just tending bar and roofing a few days a week, putting roofs on houses.
So when you're not pouring, Arnold Palmer's and Tom Collins, you find yourself carrying ladders and climbing up and doing really gritty, difficult work. I've done just about every kind of exterior job there is, and I think the hardest work I've ever done is roofing.
Yeah.
So you're doing this work, and you have an experience ultimately that will utterly shape your life. What happened?
So it was the end of the day. I was working for two wonderful brothers, Stu and Bruce and I were on the ground lowering off the house a lativator, with the hoist that sends up all the supplies. I looked at the electric lines running along the street and I said, "Are we clear?" And he said, "Yeah, we did it this way this morning." And I kind of had that feeling in my gut, that little voice or whatever, and your brain doesn't catch up and you don't pay attention to it. And we started to lower the ladder and we hit the electric lines, 8,000 volts of electricity. And went into both of us, in my hands, out my feet, my socks, my boots. And it essentially killed both of us. Stu, the brother that was working with us, he was on the roof, just flashing around the chimney for the night because we weren't finished. So he heard the noise and turned around, and he said we were both on the ground, and got to me first. And he said, eyes rolled back, foam on your mouth. He said, "I did CPR on you, but it wasn't working. So I just kind of gave you up for dead and ran across the street to call for help."
Because you weren't conscious during this point, take me through it from his experience first.
So from his experience, when I did come back to life and I crawled up next to him, he was working on Bruce and I had no idea what had transpired. He looked at me and he said, because I crawled up from behind him, he said, "How are you here?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And then I did mouth to mouth, and he was doing chest compressions on Bruce. And then the paramedics and the police came and moved us away. I looked reasonably fine, and that's when Stu came over and we started to talk. And he said, "What happened?" I said, "I guess we hit the wires." And he said, "Yeah, I heard it." I said, "I know. I saw you coming down the ladder. I was yelling to you, 'Get Bruce, Stewie, get Bruce, Stewie, get Bruce.'" And he just shook his head. He said, "No, you didn't say anything." And I said, "Well, I did. I saw you." And he said, "No." He said, "When I came to you, you were out." And he said, "After I tried CPR on you, I ran across the street to call for help. And the whole time in my mind, I'm thinking, we killed Dan, we killed Dan." He hadn't even gotten to his brother yet. So he came down to me, worked, gave up, ran across the street, called for help, ran back past me, still dead, to his brother. And then that's when I crawled up.
And Danny, just to be clear, so our listeners know, and so the interviewer asking these questions knows, you weren't breathing. Is that what you're saying? Is that what his experience of you was?
Yeah. Stu said to me, "You had no heartbeat. Your eyes are rolled back. You had foam all over your mouth, and you weren't breathing." Stu and I, you can imagine, many times, he passed 10 years ago at 66, I guess Stu was. When you have an accident like this, you're connected, man. Whether it's a trauma like you had or I had, or you served together in war or a car accident. So Stu and I went out, every year, a couple times a year. We stayed in touch a lot, and I would always say to him, "How long was I dead, Stu?" And he said, "Danny, I don't know. 4, 5, 6 minutes." He said, "There's no question you were dead." I know I was because of the experience. There's no question. I was not of this world, man.
Well, so now jumping from his experience into yours, you're lowering this thing. You hit 8,000 volts. That obviously kills people. Unfortunately, killed your dear friend. It killed you. What did you experience?
Well, as soon as the electric hit me, I thought I was either shot or there was like an atomic explosion or something. It was this just tremendous surge of energy through me in a nanosecond. And then an absolute peace and a calm. I wasn't scared. I wasn't yelling for help. And it was as if, John, I was standing in the yard looking at Stu coming down the ladder. And that's where I'm yelling to him, Stewie, get Bruce. Stewie, go to your brother. Stewie, get Bruce. So I wasn't yelling, help me, save me. And when Stewie got to me, it's interesting. He said that I was on my side in fetal position and he rolled me over. Although when I saw him coming down the ladder, that wasn't the case. I was not laying down looking at him sideways. It was as if I was standing watching him. So the whole perspective that I had was just one of the most wildest things that I experienced. And then as I saw him coming down and I'm saying, Stewie, get Bruce, get Bruce. I guess the best way to describe it, it's the hardest part of the book to write. My life force, my soul, my energy, you and I, I call it my spirit. I just had that sense. It left my body. It left. I was no longer there. And it was joined. I didn't go through a tunnel or a light, but I was joined with what I believe to be God. It was a dark, floating, peaceful, joyful, loving, and those words do not even come close to doing it justice. When I went to the hospital afterwards, I remember the doctors, I told them about what happened, and they were just, no, 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 because it defies logic,
Yeah.
right? When we experience the divine, it defies logic. So now I'm with God, I believe is God, and I have a choice to stay or come back. And I didn't want to come back. And I said, what about my mom? I didn't say it in words. What about my mom and what about Lisa, who was my girlfriend then on and off? I was actually on my way that day to break up with her and tell her I loved her, but I was moving back to Aspen. And in that instant, then now I'm back in my body. So I left like that and I came back. And I came back when I asked that question. And in my keynotes, I talk about, I had a question, John, that I struggle with. You probably did too. And my question was, why did I come back to life?
Yeah.
Why me? I wasn't married. I had no kids. Bruce was 37, three beautiful kids, beautiful wife. His daughter was a couple months old. And so I struggled with that so much. And then when I stopped asking it, the answer kind of just popped in, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And I thought, I asked God, what about my mom and what about Lisa? And then I was back. So for me, love is really what brought me back. And it's the foundation for everything. So for some reason, the energy of love, which I believe is God, said, no, 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 you got some things to do back there. And then I just said, okay, let me kind of figure that out. I know the answer. Let's figure out how I can do it.
You've been living this story and this really recovery, the gift of your life now for 3+ decades.
Mm,
You've been sharing your story on platforms all over the world. And I'm sure afterwards you have people come up to you and some of them greet you with skepticism. We'll talk about them next. But
oh,
I'm sure
yeah.
you've also met folks who've greeted you with a hug and said, brother, listen to my story.
Mm.
Can you share one of someone who shared their near-death experience with you?
Oh, yeah. I got a bunch. There was this one guy, I was working for Progressive Auto Insurance out in Colorado Springs, and he came up to me and he said, man, I appreciate your story. I had a similar experience. So he had a motor vehicle accident, motorcycle accident, and he was in a coma for a long time. And he had a very similar experience to me, right? No light, no tunnel. And he said to me, is there anything different because you came back? And I thought, and I said, I think the biggest difference is I always believed that there was life after this, raised Catholic. I always believed there was heaven. And the difference is now I know it. I don't have to go on faith anymore. I know it. And I said, what about you? And he looked and he said, well, I can see auras around people. I
Wow.
can see their color, and it goes from black, which is evil and dark, to a very, very bright light. So now, as you can imagine, John, I'm like a little nervous. And I said, did you ever see like a really, really bright light person? And he said, yeah, I only saw this one woman and it was just amazing. And then I paused and I said, what color am I? And he started laughing. He said, you're like a really light gray. I said, oh my God, that's good. One of the most powerful stories I ever got was from a woman out in Cleveland. I was doing a workshop and she came up to me. You know how it is. You pick up on people and you don't know if they're engaged or if they're skeptical about your work or your story. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, my daughter died when she was 12 years old. It was quite a few years ago. And she said, right now, I feel like I can move on. And she gave me a hug. And I mean, I'm like, okay. So when my story helps people realize that this journey's not perfect, it has its struggles, and let's just keep going. Like the poet, I think it's a Rumi, we're all just walking one another home.
Hmm.
So if we can love and support one another, that's the key.
You've also, I'm sure, encountered folks who say, dude, I'm glad you had your trippy dream, but welcome back to reality. Life is an
Yeah, yeah,
accident. 12.8
yeah.
billion years ago, there was an accidental boom, and somehow,
Right.
miraculously, through nothing other than chance,
Hmm.
life erupted. And when life is over here, it's over here, period.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
didn't have an experience with God. You had a wild dream, and your friend
yeah,
is no longer living.
yeah.
How do you, I'm sure you hear
Yeah,
that
I've
all.
I've heard
What do
that
you
before.
say?
There was an emergency room doctor. He was a young guy when I was in the first hospital because then they medevaced me to another one. And I told him about it, and he said, "No, you just had loss of consciousness, LOC." And I said, "No, I've passed out drunk and I've been elbowed playing basketball or I've been knocked out. I know what a loss of consciousness is, and this was not one." And so then after I was thinking about that, for me, I said it's a UOC, it's a union of consciousness because that's what it really felt like for me. And then with the skeptics, I said, I don't have proof for you of what happened other than what Stewie told me. And he ran across, and, when we had the lawsuit, it's all in the big, thick binder of the attorneys interrogating all of us. And I said, so I don't want to sit here and argue with you about this. My thought is I want to lead my life in the best way of goodness and love that I can, because I think there's something connected that on the other side. Now, if you don't think there's anything that happens afterwards, it doesn't matter, right? But I'm going to bet on the fact because I know that goodness and love and morals and getting back after it when you screw up is what's important.
What happened to you physically? We're hearing a little bit about your spiritual journey, and you're talking about
Yeah.
soul and an encounter with God, and then you come back, and so
Mm.
that's your spirit. What happened to you physically?
Well, physically, I had burns on both hands, blisters, and then I had holes on each side of each foot where the electricity exited. So they took me, I was in a hospital for 9 or 10 days where they monitored my heart and my kidneys and all that kind of stuff, my brain to make sure that I was okay. And then I had some debridement on my feet and my hands. So they cut out the necrotic skin on my inside of my left toe. They took a little patch from my hip skin and grafted it on the inside of my foot. So I was on crutches. Both feet were bandaged. It was kind of interesting when I got out because I went home to my mom and dad's house, and Lisa, who is my wife now of 30 some years, who I was ready to not
Mm.
marry. And I'm kind of glad that I did. My one brother jokes and said it took 8,000 volts for you to marry that beautiful woman. And I'm like, yeah. And it's worked out. We got three beautiful kids. So the physical side was just that struggle of just kind of getting around. And then, of course, people see you and they want to ask. And sometimes you're like, man, I don't want to get into this with this person.
Right.
So it was just some time, but it was more the emotional
I was
side of
wanting to ask
things.
you about that. You
Yeah.
have this encounter, which any one of my friends who've had a near-death experience come back changed, and at first,
Mhm.
not necessarily in a positive way.
Yeah.
It leaves them empty somehow. Not only
Mhm.
did you have this encounter, but you also lost a dear friend that day. And
Mhm.
there's now a widow raising kids all by herself, and
Mhm.
all this stuff that you're wrestling with. What was that like for you going through this survivor's guilt?
Yeah, that was brutal. And it lingered for a long time, man. That's why I say to people, you might think after this that I come back as a changed man, inspired, a holy roller. And I didn't. I was broken. And then several months go by and people see the outside and they think, okay, you're better. You can move past this. But it's that huge disconnect between what they see on the outside and how you feel on the inside. And that's where I was. So I struggled a lot. Months after the accident, I went down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina with the intention of not coming back. I was drinking a whole lot. I wouldn't let anybody in. My faith was shattered. And I thought, man, I can't do this anymore. So I was just going to go down and grab a hose and put it in the tailpipe of my Jeep and roll the windows up on the beach because I love the beach. And I thought, okay, whoever finds me doesn't know me. There won't be a mess. I mean, it's crazy the thoughts you have. And thankfully, that did not transpire. And I came back, and then Lisa and I got married less than a year later. So the accident was 92. We got married in 93. We had our first son, Luke, in 94. And then it was like, I'm like, what is happening here?
Right.
But I continued to struggle. I bounced through some jobs, drank way too much for all the wrong reasons. I was a real jerk a lot of times for a nice clean word to describe my behavior and treatment of other people. But it was a struggle, man.
You said a moment ago, I drove down to the Outer Banks with the intention of going by a hardware store and then watching the sun set for the final time.
Yeah.
And you said for some reason I did not.
Yeah.
You've had some time to kind of evaluate that. What's the reason? Why not go through with this?
Yeah. Yeah. It was one reason wrapped in two experiences, and I will always remember it. I'm in a hardware store down there, right? Little hardware store in Kill Devil Hills, looking at hoses, and a woman walks by.
Oh, gosh.
She's about 5 foot, spiked white hair, suntan, wrinkled skin, bright blue eyes, bright white smile. And she's like my beach bum angel. And she walked by and she said something, and it literally shook me out of my thinking. I'm like, what am I doing here? I can't do this. I never saw her again. I don't know. And I believe in angels,
Yeah.
not halos, wings, and swords. I believe there's people that cross your path when you need somebody to cross your path. And she was it. So I didn't buy the hose that day. I did the next best thing. I went out and I got drunk for a couple hours. And now I'm walking back to my motel and I see a phone booth on the edge of the motel, seashell covered parking lot. And I'm like, half drunk. And I'm like, I don't remember seeing that the past day or two. So I'm magically, like, divinely drawn into this. And I call my mom, collect call. Some of us remember, collect call from Danny. We accepted charges. And I did. And she said, when are you coming home? We can't wait to see you. She knew I was hurting, but she didn't know what degree. And I had a lump in my throat the size of a softball. And I said, Mama, I'll be home in a couple of days. I love you too. And it was the experience with that woman that led me to the phone booth. And then when I walked out, two things happened. Number one, the little voice in my head said, I wonder what it's going to be like when I get better. It was the first time, John, I entertained the possibility of another side of tragedy. Like, it's going to be okay. You're going to move through this. And then that why did I come back to life slowly over years
Yeah.
started shifting to say, don't worry about that. What are you going to do with it? So
Right.
the question was replaced with, what are you going to do with this, man? You're back. You owe it to your friend to show up and contribute to humanity and not be a jerk.
Hmm.
And that didn't happen overnight either. It's just, how that lays the foundation for you
Yeah.
when you say, okay, I'm going to head in another direction. It might be a long journey, step by step by step by step, weeks, months, years. I'm heading in that direction. That's what happened down there.
Well, thank heavens for the 5 foot sun tanned angel in a hardware store hose section
I know.
and
I
some
always,
telephone
I always
booth
see
and
her,
some parking
see
lot.
her character, in a movie. I can see her in my brain. I see her.
You've introduced me to a term called functional fog.
Mm-hmm.
You had some experience living there. What does it mean to experience functional fog?
Yeah, I think the functional fog, John, for most people is when you're just going through the motions. There was ADP research that said 67% of employees are just kind of showing up for work, going through the motions, not fully engaged. You know what I mean? They're somewhat productive, but not real passionate. And that's what I mean in life. You've seen people where they're, how you doing? And they say, oh, living the dream, another day in paradise. And those responses are dripping with sarcasm.
Yeah.
It's just where you're not really present, passionate, on purpose, and really waking up every day saying, hey, thanks. Let me go out and create what I want to create. Usually when I do that on stage and I go through rock bottom and then the functional fog, you can see everybody. And then I have a simple assessment, a radical reverence for life assessment that people can take. And it talks to them about the 5 principles that I think are very powerful for us. And I would say in my workshops, 70% of people are in the functional fog
That's
when they answer it and
interesting.
they laugh because they're not taking time to be still. They don't have a clear vision for themselves. Some of their relationships are not as strong as they can be. Their self-talk is not as positive as it can be. It's all those principles that have been around forever. It's just if we don't systematize those and implement them, then they're just self-help personal growth stuff that's out there, but you're not really practicing it. You know what a good diet is to be healthy and lose weight. Unless you eat that diet, it's not going to serve you well.
Right. Years ago, and I'm going to get this a little messed up, so I won't give the exact facts, but I learned that in fog, drivers actually drive faster. So if you cover up the speed limit, you actually go even faster than you would normally because you're disoriented in the fog. You somehow get so lost in it that you actually accelerate and create a dangerous situation and make it even more dangerous. So for many of our listeners, we may not even recognize we're in the midst of this fog accelerating.
Mm-hmm.
What are some signs, Danny, that I might be in functional fog today? that one of our listeners might be in functional fog today?
Yeah. I think the one sign, John, is really awareness. As you and I talk about it right now for the past 2 or 3 minutes, I'm sure some of the listeners are going, oh my gosh, John and Danny are talking about me right now. So awareness that you're in it is the first key, because awareness precedes growth and change. And then I would say you just got to look around at some key things. Are your relationships strong? Are you engaged with the people that you love? Are you somewhat passionate about where you go to work, what you do, who you do it with? Do you have a really clear vision? Do you say, okay, there's 6 months left in this year. When I get to December, right? I know it's not 6 months right now, but when I get to December, this is what needs to be real for me with my health and my wealth and my career. And I look at this every week and I say, okay, that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm working on. So there's a couple things. And then the other thing I think, which is vital, is are you creating times for stillness? Because your spirit, the fourth energy, right? In addition to your heart, brain, and lungs, your spirit resides in stillness. And you've really got to just disconnect, shut down what I call the lawnmower of life, because it has no off switch. It's very noisy. You got to just sit with yourself. And people go, well, when I do that, things show up. I'm like, that's the whole point. Because the late, great Kobe Bryant, John, I'm sure you know, he had a great point. He said he would meditate and be still because then he could welcome all his thoughts and emotions and he could do with them what he wanted instead of them doing to him what they wanted. So I always talk to people, no, sit with them, listen to your thoughts and realize which ones are not serving me well. And then realize that you're not your thoughts, you're the thinker of them. So even in the midst of brutal circumstances, you can choose to think more positively about who's going to help you move through this, how you're going to move through it, what you've moved through before. So there's validation that you can get there.
Give me a time in your life when you did this. So it's one thing to talk clinically about this and research and Kobe Bryant, but be specific. What's a time when you found yourself with a coffee on the porch and then you realize, my gosh, I have been abusing myself. I've been speaking to myself in ways I would not tolerate anyone else to speak to me, and here we are.
No, it's well, after the accident, I did it for sure. About 7 years into our marriage, Lisa and I were struggling pretty bad, and it was probably mostly my fault because I was insecure with my jobs. I was insecure with myself. I was drinking way too much vodka on the rocks. My brother-in-law passed from ALS, who was one of my best friends, and we went to a Christmas party for him. They rented out a movie theater. And I was just having such a hard time with him being sick and dying. And man, I got stone drunk. And I woke up the next day and that voice said to me, you can't do this. And my kids looked at me and they said, Dad, what are you doing? Lisa's just shaking her head. And that's when that voice shifted and said, yo, man, you can't be like this. You can't have that voice that says, this sucks. I can't believe my brother-in-law's dying. The world doesn't make sense. Here we go again on tragedy. Right. You got to just show up and say, I'm going to love and support him and my sister as best I can. And I'm going to pray for him. So see, when you shift those thoughts, that's where you move forward. It's the same in business. You and I talked, I went out on my own years ago, everything was good. And then business goes down and you look and you go, okay, I guess I'm not going to get to the keynote stage. I'm not as good as John O'Leary. I'm not as good as John Gordon. I'm not as good as Damon West, all those things that show up. And you got to catch them and say, no, man, you got a great message. People need to hear it. You need to just sit down and send out another 30 marketing emails. So you could see when you just asked me, listen, I know all this works, everybody listening, and I ain't perfect for sure.
I'd rather not have perfection. I'd rather have a practitioner, someone leaning into grace and striving to get a little bit better today than yesterday. And I got one across the screen for me right now. You've also got a sacred question that you encourage your audiences, your family, and yourself to ask and answer. What's the sacred question?
Yes, the sacred question is, what will I create with the time I have left? And that has evolved out of that whole phone booth. As I've gotten to be almost 63 years old, over 30 years, and I've had all the challenges and the relationships, and I've lost people that I love, and we've seen all the tragedy in the world and the political divide and people suffering around the world. I think if everybody just can really focus on what will they create with the time that I have left. And sometimes people look at me and go, wait, you want me to think about dying? And I'm like, yeah. And they go, well, it doesn't make sense. But when you ask that question, and I say to most people, ask yourself that question, what will I create with the time that I have left? And they go, yeah. I say, what's your main focus there? And they're going, create. But if you think about it, Marcus Aurelius in 161, Emperor of Rome, said, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and think and say. It's the same message. John Bon Jovi, who wore leather pants, right, not a toga, he sang that song, "It's my life, it's now or never. I'm not going to live forever. I just want to live while I'm alive." So the message has been around a long time. And that's what I'm just offering you. Don't fixate on the fact that you're going to die one day. I get that. Just contemplate the fact that, hey, man, at some point this journey is going to be over. And you know what? Right now it's not. So what can I focus on today? Who can I focus on? How can I focus on? So sacred again doesn't mean sacred anything to do with religion.
Right.
Sacred means that which matters most. That's another definition for sacred, that which matters most. So what can I create today? What can I bring into existence? What matters most for me and my people that I love and that I lead?
We could pivot into, so how do we build empires? How do we really touch the world? And that's one thing we could talk about. But for me, it's more about, how do I lead my family? How do I serve Beth way better as a husband? How do I raise up four kids who actually know who they are and whose they are and what matters, and how to live into that each day? So as you ask the question, what will I create with the time that I've left? How has that changed the way you love the ones in your home? How does that impact you as a husband? How does
Oh
it
yeah,
change you?
it's changed it tremendously over the years. There's a great quote. Robert Heinlein, a science fiction writer, said, "Love is the condition in which the happiness of another person is essential to your own." So I just think to myself, and I think my kids, if they said, "What's one of Dad's mantras?" it would be "Lead with love." And that's really what it comes down to. So almost every day when I wake up, I'm thinking to myself, how can I wake up and just Danny Bader be a loving person? Not a judgmental person, not an argumentative person. How can I just be a loving person? I don't have to accept other people's values and beliefs to be loving.
Right.
And that's really changed everything. One of the catalysts for writing A Radical Reverence for Your Life was, John, I lost about 5 friends, brothers, brother-in-laws in about 6 years. And they were from 57 to 63 years old. And I think that was the proverbial smack across the face that said, hey, man, this ain't forever.
Right.
And, we all say that every day is a gift. Do we really live it?
Yeah.
And when that becomes the foundation for how you show up, I think that changes everything, man. That changes your relationship, changes how you lead, changes how you speak on stage, how you write, how you do podcasts, what you say, how you interact when you walk into a store and 2 people walking out the door that you don't even know.
Right.
So yeah, love's the foundation. Love of self, love of others, and love of life.
So about 10 days ago, my family and I were in Banff, Canada, and one of the kids, I think we're at Lake Louise, which is a crazy, beautiful place, said it's impossible for me to imagine that God did not make all this. And in hearing that, what I'm hearing is a radical reverence for where they are and the gift of their life. It's relatively easy to experience that reverence when you are in Lake Louise, in one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah.
How do you have radical reverence when you're late for work and when you're stumbling through the day and when the electric bill needs to get paid and just life is happening to you? How do you embrace
Yeah.
radical reverence in the monotony of each day?
Yeah, that's good. I think for me, I just take a deep breath amidst all those struggles. And I just am thankful that I'm here. And I'm thankful for a lot of people in my life that are here. For me, it just is, yes, you got a lot of BS we got to deal with right now. Let me just stop and be thankful for something that is outside of this. And that usually brings me back. My nephew and his wife just had their first baby, and we were going to go meet him on Monday. And we didn't because some people in the family had coughs and colds and flus. So they kind of shut it down. So I was so excited just to hold this little dude, my great nephew. And that just brings me joy. So now the anticipation of that and hugging my nephew, I haven't seen him since the baby was born. So sometimes it's just those simple things that bring me back and go, yeah, I got some stuff I got to deal with in life. And I'm going to hold that baby pretty soon. And for me, it brings me back.
How has this experience and then the journey afterwards changed the way you feel about death?
It's changed the way I feel about death. Listen, I'm in no hurry to die again. All right, everybody who's listening right now, Danny Bader will be 63. I'm good to go to 93. My dad just passed at 95 last year. I'm good. I'm in no hurry. And if somebody threatens me, I'm going to fight for my life too, right? And I know that when this body stops again, there's a part of me that doesn't. And that brings me some peace. And again, though, I'm still in my human body with my mind and with my survival instinct. So I'm still going to fight to live. So it's really an interesting dynamic that says, yeah, I enjoy this life and I'm okay with what what's going to come next, because I got a good taste of it. And that's why I struggled so much. My mom would always say to me, she would say, Danny, it's like you're living to die again when I came back, because I would just shut people out.
Yeah.
And I would say to her, Mom, she says, we all love you so much. And I said, I know, I love you too. And whew, whatever was happening over there was pretty good. That question, I tell you, John, I'm one of 8 kids, right? My sister's the oldest, and then 7 boys. So we're like the Catholic version of Snow White from the 70s and 80s. And I remember
That's
when
awesome.
my one brother said to me after the accident, we were sitting at the kitchen table and they were all there loving, but we also have some humor. And he said, I had this question, why did I come back to life? Why did I come back to life? And he said, well, when you describe your experience, do you think you were like on your way into heaven? Or you? And I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And he said, well, then your answer is pretty obvious. You failed the entrance exam. And I was like, oh, that's great. Good. So they sent me back.
Someone listening to us right now is just really struggling in their walk, whether it's their faith walk, their relationship with a loved one, the inability to be in a relationship with a loved one. They're struggling with their kids or their inability to have kids. I mean, there's just people all over the world right now hearing our conversation who are beat.
Yeah.
They're just kind of fried. Give us some encouragement as we get ready to go into a few of my favorite quotes from you. But what encouragement or advice would you offer someone right now thinking about going out to a hardware store and walking down the hose aisle?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do it. You are worth more than that. I would say sit silently and let the goodness and the beauty of the Spirit connect with you. Make a phone call or go see somebody who knows you who loves you and you love them. And just trust that you can move through it. Don't hope. When people say hope, I don't use the word hope too much, John. Hope means to want something to happen. Trust is a firm belief in the reliability of someone or something. So, one of the chapters in A Radical Reverence for Your Life is trust you are a resilient human being. So if you're struggling right now and you're listening to this right now, just through this podcast, I'm giving you a hug, John's giving you a hug. Just take a deep breath and know with every fiber of your body, you will move through the struggle right now and you will come out the other side. And when you get through struggle, you don't come out the other side the same way. No, you don't. When a ball bounces back to you, the ball's the same ball. When you move through struggle, right, you are coming out of it different and you're coming out of it better, and you will. That's what I would sit. And, of course, I would give them a hug if I was there physically and sit and cry or pray with them or whatever we needed to do.
Danny Bader, you have shared a whole bunch of quotes with me, either in the past in a conversation, through podcasts, speeches, or books. There were many, many, many to draw from, but I'm picking 3 today as we begin wrapping up our conversation. The first quote from Danny Bader is, life changes twice. Once when tragedy happens, and again when we decide what we're going to create because of it.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
When you have that life-changing incident, right, which screenwriters would call the inciting incident, right? I lowered a ladder, you lit a match, Rocky Balboa's fighting in a church before anybody knows about him. Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle there's always that inciting incident for somebody where you go, man, life's never going to be the same. And then you got to understand, yeah, it's part of the journey. And now I have a choice. I'm not going to be the same. How do I want to be?
Right.
Do I want to be a Danny Bader, a drunk, divorced idiot that I was on that path? Or do I want to say, hey, Lisa, my wife, thanks for hanging in there with me. I'm going to continue to be a better husband every day and a better father. That's where the choice is.
Second quote is, hold useful thoughts.
Yeah. Yes, the abbreviation I use is HUT, hold useful thoughts. And it really comes back, John, to what we spoke about earlier. Your voice in your head is always going. You are the thinker of those thoughts. Most times for most people, they're negative. They're not useful because the way we think puts us into an emotional state. And it's from there that we act. We don't act from logic.
Right.
Right? Because I would have stopped lowering the ladder and you would not have lit a match in your gasoline. Right? We act from emotion. So if the thoughts are driving those emotions, we got to make sure that they're useful. So I always use the example, we have Luke, Joey, and Lizzie. Lisa and I have 3 beautiful kids. And Lizzie was a cross-country runner. College, she went to Penn and then Virginia. She was a really good runner. And I remember on the cross-country, they're running 3, 4, 5 miles, whatever it might be. And it's cold in October, November. It might be raining. They're in shorts. And if I see her at the end and she's on the final hill, she's got another quarter of a mile, I'm not yelling to her, run, Lizzie, run. Daddy loves you. I would just yell to her. I'd call her Diz because Joey called her Dizzy when he couldn't say Lizzie. I say, Diz, hut, hut. And that's what she hears. So all I want to do is get her to say, what am I thinking right now? Because I'm tired. It's muddy. My legs are cold. I got this hill. That girl from Princeton is 40 yards in front of me. I'm not going to catch her. So it's just the ability to reframe. See, when you reframe to useful thoughts, it doesn't change the struggle. It doesn't change the facts. It just changes how you engage with it. And that I've experienced that changes everything.
Final quote, Danny. Your breaths
Mm.
and heartbeats are automatic, but they're not guaranteed.
Yeah, I know that in a way that an awful lot of people don't. Every day you hear about somebody who experienced a tragic accident and who is no longer here, or who got a brutal diagnosis and will not be here for a long time. So, yeah, your breaths and beats, while they're automatic, right? We don't wake up and go, okay, go start. Let me start breathing. They're automatic, but they're not guaranteed. And that shouldn't be a sad, morbid, depressing thought for people. You got to hear this the right way, everybody. That should be really empowering, inspired, and a thought filled with gratitude. It says, yeah, I'm here. Let me go out and just be the best John O'Leary, best Danny Bader I can be today. And a lot of that gets back to love and focus and relationships. And let that be the foundation. And then, yeah, go, build a business, make a ton of money, whatever else is, but let that be the foundation.
Danny, where can people learn more about the work you do and the speeches you deliver, the books you've
Yeah.
written?
Thanks, John. The best is probably dannybader.com, my website. And then from there, you can see the social media. So I engage on LinkedIn from a business perspective and Instagram mostly, and TikTok from more of a personal. I do something you and I talked about. It's called the 1 minute wisdom. And I always joke it's usually less than 1 minute. So years ago, I think it was Lizzie, one of the kids gave me the Stoic quotes, Ryan Holiday's calendar, right? And I thought, man, this would be cool. I'm going to read one of these each day and just say what it means to me and maybe what it means to the audience. And I was only going to do it for a year. And now I'm 1,240 days into it or something. So I like that because you never know how the message is going to land for somebody and you don't know who needs to hear it, myself included. I see and hear a lot of messages every day that I needed to see and hear. So they can find me pretty much at the website.
So when I visit with you, I think a little bit of like the saints who had an experience that shaped their life. And there are some saints like Paul who have lightning go through their body. They get knocked off the mule and they end up blind and utterly changed afterwards.
Yes. The road to Damascus,
It
right, John?
happened quickly, man, for Paul. And
Yeah.
then there are others, Danny Bader, who are a little bit more slow to have their vision cleared and to have their heart
Yeah.
turned. Yours has. What has this experience done for your faith?
Oh, it's just strengthened my faith tremendously. And it didn't do it right away because I stopped going to church and but being raised Catholic, mine was a relationship with a God who was, first a gray haired guy sitting in a big chair. And if you stole cookies, you're going to go to hell and burn. And the beautiful Catholic nuns. God's within all of us. It's the spirit. And the more I can stay connected to that through my prayer, I go to daily mass more now than I ever had. I lecture there, I receive Eucharist. And when I receive the Eucharist, it's that energy, It's me saying, hey, thanks a lot for this gift of life and keep an eye on me and help me be the best that I can be. Yeah, so it's really changed it. And growing up, you often think Catholics are the only ones that are ever going to get in heaven, and that's dissipated for me. Catholic is what works for me. Jesus is my guy. I wrote that one book, I Met Jesus from Miller Lite. And there's a divine essence in all of us, everybody listening, you all have it. It's not about where you go to church or where you don't go to church. It only wants what's best for you. So do your best to pay attention to that, connect with it, and just go out and make your world better.
Danny, we wrap every podcast with 7 questions. We call them the Live Inspired 7. Question number 1 is, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
We hear that a bunch around here, including sometimes from the
Yeah.
guy asking the question. What's one
Yeah.
positive characteristic or one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little boy growing up and wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
I think the wonder and the awe about life and just kind of going with the flow, so to speak.
If your home caught fire, and all living things are out, and you have an opportunity of running back in and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing you would grab?
Probably would grab my journal
If
or
you could
one,
sit on,
I probably
go
got
ahead.
about 12 of them over the years.
I know you write at longhand. My wife would love that. She's an occupational therapist and loves when she sees people writing. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous beach and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like next to you?
Yeah, Jesus, no question.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Probably it's all going to be okay. Iagbo. A lot of times when we were doing the ALS stuff, I had some T-shirts with just abbreviations for key terms and Iagbo, IAGBO. It's all going to be okay, and that's that trust that I talk about. Trust in yourself, trust in God. I think that's okay when people hug me or really look at me and say, "Danny, it's all going to be okay." It keeps you moving forward.
What advice would you give yourself, this college oriented, desirous to be ski bum, lost kid, age 20? What advice does he need to hear?
Oh God, I don't know. I guess it would have been just trust where you're going, trust what your destiny is and what God has in store for you. I think that's it because I was just kind of all over the place, heading back to Aspen to sell real estate and probably would have done well there and made a whole lot of money. And then probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, which I think is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Danny Bader, it's been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
He led with love.
Danny Bader experienced 8,000 volts of electricity that went through his body, died, came back, struggled mightily, was redeemed and reborn, and now lives with love. Danny, I appreciate you sharing part of your journey with us, man. It's a wild one, and we're grateful for it, and we're grateful for you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it and I love you, brother. Thanks to
Love
you
you.
and your team.
Hey, my friends, you're listening to the voice of Danny Bader. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day, listeners and viewers. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. Well, my friends, Danny Bader reminded us that being fully alive is not about avoiding hardship. It's about recognizing the gift within each of us to breathe, to slow down, to choose to live with greater presence, gratitude, and love. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll love the conversation I had a couple years back with best-selling author John Burke, incredible storyteller. After spending more than 3 decades studying thousands of near-death experiences, John shares the striking commonalities within these accounts and what they may teach us about why we are here and what to expect next. You can check out that episode at 584. It's one of my favorites with John Burke. Or you can cruise with me right now to the website, johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. And in the show notes of today's episode, I'll have a link to my buddy John Burke's. My friends, I want to thank you for tuning into our podcast. I want to thank you for this time. And until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.